he's going to be a stud. And talk about mass, that's one thing that you pick up when you do this type of work on property.
They got all this brown.
You get mass on bucks like never before, right?
Yeah.
And that's a nutrition thing. It's not as much a genetic thing.
Yeah, I don't think on small properties you can grow enough food to support more than 2 or 3 deer a year, but this can support a lot more.
Yeah.
This
the carrying capacity. Oh yeah, right.
It's huge. So much more important than plotting. And I'm not knocking down plotting.
No, we're still plotting.
We're plotting. But that's not the most important thing.
No.
It helps you to steer deer.
So one way to talk about that, you know, I don't have a good tractor or a good way to mow any of this. So I mainly do chemical to maintain my plots, right? But if I had the money right now, I wasn't paying land payments, and I had the money to get a tractor, I would get another piece of equipment to work on that instead of just a tractor. I want a skidder, right? Because it's almost indestructible on that stuff, right? And so, again, just like you're saying, I want to do my stuff where the deer live and not necessarily bait them out to the wide open where they don't want to be.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I've been to many properties. One of them was Redneck Blinds. I get down there, and a couple of the big names in the industry had been there before me, right? And recommended all the food plots and breaking the food plots up with switchgrass and all this other, which is a lot of good stuff, don't get me wrong. I said, so what do they recommend in the timber? Well, what do you mean? No. What did they recommend in the woods? Well, we never went in the woods. What?
Yeah.
You had 2 of the top guys in the industry come here to help you on deer, and you never went in the woods where the deer live?
And the industry for private landowners is definitely heavily biased in that direction.
Oh, for sure.
And it's by far the wrong direction for a small property owner to go. This stuff here.
Well, but the reason it's biased that way is because all the money they pumped into advertisement to get that, right?
Yeah, you can't make money off of it. You know, steel can sell you a chainsaw, but after that, you're on your own.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just you and the gas station.
You know what it costs to do food plots? I mean, there's a lot of money invested in a high-quality food plot, and then the maintenance involved in that.
Yeah. And you can't, if you're on a 20, 40, 60-acre property, you're not supplying nutrition for deer. The reason they have food plots is to attract them to a location so that you can kill them.
Oh, for sure.
And it's not because you are improving the carrying capacity of the land. You improve the carrying capacity of the land by removing the canopy and getting all this growth in here.
Well, for the small landowner to go in and put in food plots, typically, if you're going to get equipment in there to clear it to make a food plot, you're talking $4,000 to $5,000 an acre just to clear the stuff off. That's not including what you're going to do and smoothing all your soil out, your fertilizer, your seed, and all that, right?
But the last thing you want to do is go in and clear out a 5-acre field.
No,
it's not going to be used by mature deer in daylight, except in incredibly rare circumstances. 0.1, I try to keep things less than 0.1 acre. And so if I have an acre field, I'll let it grow up in the old field and then count out 5 or 6.1 acres, and it'll get 10 times the use.
I agree completely
that
with
big field would get.
Again, I like the big wagon wheel scenario, and that's what's going to end up being out here in this big field in the future, right? But these
kind of things are far more useful than a big food plot.
You do 5 of these strips
along the length of this. There might be 5 bedded doe families, and they can each pop up and eat from this,
separated.
and they'll still be in cover. They're not competing with each other, and the buck has to move to find them.
It's made edge. It's got sunlight into the native vegetation over and over. We get our licking branches naturally hanging out.
So much more powerful. I just hate to see these big guys putting in big food plots and then sitting at the edge of them and waiting for a miracle.
Well, the next thing a lot of them do is they'll take a field out of crop production that they've been making money on and turn that into deer, and so they're making less money and spending more money and not getting hardly any benefit out of it in the big picture of harvest.
Not enhancing their land in a way that can actually help deer nutrition, to grow antlers, to grow big bodies and all that.
I mean, in the Midwest,
they're going to grow their big bodies, and really, it's the winter. It's getting through the winter time. So if you have this kind of stuff in the winter, they'll all be in here eating this all winter, and that staves off the starvation mode that they were meant to go through in prehistoric times.
They were designed that way.
They were designed
naturally.
Yeah, they go to a yarding area and they lay there for 2 or 3 months, and they starve to death slowly enough so that you hope they can get on their feet and work their way back out of there at the end of it. Here they don't need to do that. They can find all of this is thermal cover, first of all, and they can just move around in here. And
there's always a mouthful of food here year round.
Yeah, and the snow, it's not like the UP or northern Minnesota or northern Wisconsin. It's going to abate. They might have a few days or a couple of weeks.
That's right.
Yeah.
If we have a week of snow, that's unusual.
Yeah, and that's the same for southern Michigan where I'm at. The further north you go, the more concerned you have to be about such things. But if you had a choice, I want to put my property entirely into food plots, or I want to put my property into heavy cover like you're doing. If the heavy cover is 10 times or 100 times better.
I was up, just mentioned the deep snow, I was up at the UP probably been 6 or 7 years ago, and they had it cut really hard. It wasn't quite a clear cut. As it came, the vegetation came back, and they get the deep snows in the wintertime, the deer were eating everything they could eat, right? Yeah. So I show up just after green up, and I'm walking around, and all these trees are flat on top, and about this big around, right? And I'm walking around, I'm looking at this, and I'm like, man, these haven't leafed out yet. I don't know what this is. I've never seen this type of tree come up and just flat all the way across the top like that. And I stood there for a minute. I said, that's the height of the snow.
Yes.
That's where the snowpack is. And they come in and eat everything they can eat, but they can't get the rest of it because it's underneath that crust. Yeah. It was just amazing to me because it is the number of deer, right?
Yeah.
And then he was the only guy that had that stuff in the wintertime for him to even get at.
Yeah, and I've also seen the phenomenon where you'll see rings around the trees.
Oh, yes.
And it's rabbits coming up and ringing the tree.
Well, I've seen deer
in our area. Up north it'd be porcupine.
I've seen deer eat the bark off of hard maple trees and beech trees in Michigan.
And they got to be pretty hungry to do that.
You ain't starved is what they are.
Yeah. And that's one thing you can do is walk onto your property at the end of the winter and you can see whether you have enough of this browse or not. Because there's a hierarchy of preferred browse, and if they're eating the least preferred stuff, like red cedar, for example, in my area, if they're eating red cedar, you know they're hungry.
Yeah, you got an issue.
Yeah, you got a problem, and you need to get more of what you have.
No, March is the time to get out there and check and see what you got left of food.
Yeah.
If you don't have any food in March, either you got to reduce some numbers or you got to do some more work, one or the other.
They couldn't even, no matter how high your population, they can't put a dent on this place. And they can't put a dent on my place either.
That's right.
You can hardly tell, that it's been browsed. There's no browse lines or anything like that.
Years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would have still been doing 4 or 5 bedding areas out here. I would have come into my
learning process. I've cut my entire property too. Yeah. But
say 10 years ago, you wouldn't have thought that was the answer.
No. I remember the first property that I ever saw like this one was geez, this would be embarrassing if I forget his name. I know him really well. Jake Illinger and I went to right on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, he's a friend of ours. Him and a buddy own a property, and I'll throw his name up on here, and I'll apologize to him. But we walked through a property like this, and they had both walked my Hillsdale County property the day before, and I remember them commenting when they were there, what you've done looks good. You need to do a lot more of it. And then I went and saw what a lot more looked like. And this was, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. And it was a lot more. And as we're walking along, we can see does raising their head up to watch us walk by. And we walk by, and because they
don't bust out.
No, they don't bust out. They might stand up and, what are you doing? The worst they might do is hop back in a circle behind us because they know it's safe. Probably safe back that way.
Or go 75 or 100 yards and stop.
And stop and wait for us and then lay back down. So then Jake and I both came away and said, man, we got to cut a lot more. And now I've gotten to a point where unless it's a really good mass tree with big limbs coming out the sides, they all should be laying on the sides if all I want is deer head.
Yeah.
if I don't want timber. So I've taken every stick of useful timber off my property, and as long as I own it, there will never be any trend towards. There's a few walnuts that are going to grow into veneer trees, possibly, but probably never take a stick of timber out of it again.
Well, but a lot of times if a guy hits his timber hard now and gets a pretty good income off it and puts that toward the land debt, right?
Yep.
Well, you knock all that interest off for the next 20 years, you know what I mean?
And that's what I did with my property.
Right. I mean, so a guy will say, oh man, if you'd wait another 10, 15 years, you're going to make a lot more money. Well, wait a second, if I get it now and save all that interest for those 10 to 15 years and I can hunt my property in the meantime and it's what I want, that makes more sense to me personally, right?
Yeah, so everybody has to know what they want. And
that's what
if all you want is a wildlife and deer hunting property, the only thing you're going to hurt is squirrels. But I got plenty of squirrels in my yard. Yeah. So I'm giving them a bunch of oak trees in my yard, and I'm taking the trees. They get the trees in my yard, I get the trees in my woods,
that's something to
I'm optimizing it for deer.
Well, and that's something to talk about too. You can have pockets. Trees naturally grow in pockets anyway.
Yes.
You can have a pocket over here that's 5 acres.
Absolutely.
It's all white oaks growing. It's going to grow good timber or whatever. Yeah. There's going to be pockets on every property where nothing good is growing in there.
And you occasionally want those because in daylight you can cause the deer to go around those areas and you can walk right through the middle of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
for example.
But several years back, I wasn't planning on cutting the whole property. I had no desire. I didn't even think it was the right thing to do. But the more of this I do and keep going back and seeing what other people were doing that's similar and going and looking at, going back, I'm telling you, I see no negative in keep cutting, right?
Yeah, right. Me too.
Every edge I find, I want to cut, and then what I'm stacking walls of cover. And Jeff Sturgis talks about that some, right?
Yeah.
And so I started the property line with an access trail, and then I got a wall cover. Then I got my deer access trail, and then another wall cover, right? And then that all leads into the next terrain feature that I'm doing walls of cover on and connecting that. Yeah. So I got my main interstate and then all the little short accesses, but I just keep working on it, right?
But all this is based on a fundamental understanding of deer behavior, and that is they spend every moment of their lives believing that they're about to die from a predator constantly. And so this kind of cover is what they want to have in daylight. It'd be like, imagine if you're and you're a Marine, you've been trained in urban combat, I'll bet. If you're moving around in your city and there are snipers up there waiting for you to expose yourself to shoot you, you would move a lot differently than you do in your normal life.
Sure, right?
And that's the world the deer live in. So a guy goes out and he has a nice place where he can see 200 yards through the woods, and he says, "Guy, I got a 30-06 here. I can kill that deer from a long ways away," but the deer's never going to be in there because he's not going to expose himself.
He doesn't feel safe.
Right.
So I use the analogy of a house, right? And so you have a house, you put walls on the inside of it because every person in there, even though we're the same family, we all want our little secure little separate little area, right?
Yes.
And so that's the same thing here. I'm laying walls of cover down organized so I can get back in there and work, but I get my amount of sunlight I need to come in because I'm taking enough I'm doing enough cutting to make that happen. But then I'm leaving a little open, right? So they have something to move around, whether it's this type of deal or I just don't cut there, right? And then, again, it's just stacking walls of cover, leaving hallways or open rooms, and separating the deer, and the sun's going to do most of this here fixing everything.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's going to be the name of the video, Walls of Cover. That's good. And thinking about how people operate in their home is a good thing too. It's like, how many chairs do you have in your living room? I live alone. I could see 7 or 8 people in my living room, or I can sit in 7 or 8 places.
Right.
So you hear a lot of talk about, I made a bedding spot for a buck.
Right.
Well, what you need is 8 bedding spots for that buck in that little area so that he can lay whatever's optimal for him that day. with wind and weather
and sun and whole nine yards.
Everything else. Yeah. So you have to make a lot more of stuff than any one deer is going to use.
So my bedding areas, I used to go in, like just like you're saying, and I would make a group of beds, 3 or 4 beds, and I wanted about a half or 3/4 of an acre, right? So over the years, what I want now is about 1.5 acres if I'm just doing a designated bedding area, and I don't have time to work other places on the property, but I'm going to do 12 to 15 beds in that bedding area, because you're going to have limbs fall out and fill that spot up or whatever, right? And so I want to make sure I have enough beds available. Now, I have to add to that, I get to a property now and the guy says, so you're going to be building beds? This is my first time I've been here? No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build you a bedding area, but I'm going to cut the trees in a way that I already naturally know where the deer want to bed. I'm not going to drop that tree on that. And so it's on a ridge or on a terrain feature, it's flat and then it drops. They want to be right there on that flat before it drops.
On the military crest,
Yes, and it's even in a bottom along a creek where a creek switched back and forth like that. It's on the top of the bank. Yes, right above the drop, right? But anyways, back to, on this property, I haven't went in and started actually building exact beds yet because my numbers are so low. And I've done so much cutting. I got plenty of natural spots, right?
I do that a lot too,
In the future, as I go, my plan is I keep going in and improving those spots that they naturally want to bed in that we talked about earlier and keep those great. And a lot of this other is just going to keep coming up,
So this relates to a question for you regarding if you're making so much cover here, why aren't you worried that the deer are just going to lay anywhere in the cover?
Yeah, and just kind of what we kind of led into, right? The thing is they're naturally going to pick spots, and I'm just about as positive as I can be all the way up along the front of my property with the road there. I'm not going to have anything bedded within 75 yards of that road here because I'm lower deer
Even though
numbers.
you have heavy cover.
Even though I got heavy coverage so nobody can look into my place, right? Now, if on this 137 acres, if we would end up with 40 deer, 45, 50 deer using it, well, I'm starting to do bed. I'm starting to make the actual beds and get in there, and I'm going to do that anyway.
So you want to make it so nice that that's where they're going to lay. They're not going to lay along your trail.
Right. 100%. And keep improving that to where I have those root systems putting that high quality nutrition off that mineral stump nutrition, right? And this here's getting
you want that big buck to be laying there like this, and
exactly,
really high nutrition food.
A lot of this here, they can't touch that, but that's dense and that's security, right? They're not getting to a lot of food there. They're getting to some still. But in that bedding area, I'm going to make that premium, right? Everything they need. At the beginning of the bedding area, I'm putting a water tank, but again, my stand is there also right there at the beginning, right?